There is a strange experience many people have, yet few ever talk about. You meet someone new, and within weeks, sometimes days, the same emotional pattern begins to appear. The same disappointment, the same anxiety, the same feeling of not being enough. At first, you blame the other person. Then life moves on. Years pass. Different faces enter your life. Different circumstances. Different places. Yet somehow, the emotional experience remains almost identical. It is as if life keeps changing the actors, but never changes the script. A woman leaves. Years later, another woman leaves. A friend betrays you. Later, someone else betrays your trust. A boss humiliates you. Then another authority figure makes you feel small in exactly the same way. Different people, the same wound. Different situations, the same pain. Eventually, a disturbing question begins to emerge. What if the problem is not simply what keeps happening to you? What if the deeper question is why the same emotional pattern keeps returning? Most people spend their lives searching for answers outside themselves. They blame circumstances, bad luck, the wrong people, the wrong timing. And sometimes those explanations are partially true. But Carl Jung believed there was something deeper at work, something hidden, something powerful, something living beneath conscious awareness. He believed that many of the forces shaping our lives remain invisible to us. And because they are invisible, we mistake them for fate. We call it bad luck. We call it destiny. We call it just the way life is. But Jung offered a far more unsettling possibility. What if the life you think is happening to you is actually being shaped by a hidden part of yourself? A part you rarely see, a part you rarely question, a part that silently influences who you love, who you fear, who you trust, who you become. And until that hidden self is brought into the light, it may continue directing your life from the shadows. Jung once wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Most people read this quote and think it is about psychology. It is not. It is about your life. Because the greatest force shaping your future may not be the world around you. It may be the hidden person already living within you. For most of your life, you probably believe that your reactions were caused by other people. Someone criticizes you, and you feel hurt. Someone ignores you, and you feel rejected. Someone leaves, and you feel abandoned. The connection appears obvious. They did something. You reacted. Case closed. But Jung noticed something unusual. Two people can experience the exact same event and walk away with completely different emotional realities. One person receives criticism and sees an opportunity to improve. Another receives the same criticism and feels devastated for days. One person experiences rejection and eventually moves forward. Another carries that rejection for years. Why? If the event is the same, where does the difference come from? Jung believed the answer lies within. Long before any painful event occurs, each of us develops an invisible emotional world. A world built from childhood experiences, forgotten disappointments, silent humiliations, moments when we felt unwanted, unseen, unloved. Most of these memories never completely disappear. They simply sink beneath awareness. And from there, they begin influencing how we interpret reality. Imagine wearing a pair of glasses your entire life. You become so accustomed to them that you forget they exist. You assume what you see is reality itself. But in truth, you are seeing reality through the lens. The unconscious works in much the same way. One afternoon, a man receives a short text message. "Sorry, I'm busy today." Nothing more, nothing less. Yet within minutes, his mind begins creating a story. She's losing interest. She doesn't care. I'm being pushed away. Hours later, he feels anxious. By evening, he feels rejected. The next day, he feels angry. But what actually happened? A simple message. The emotional storm did not come from the text. It came from the meaning attached to it. A meaning created by old wounds that existed long before that moment. This is what Jung called projection. We believe we are reacting to reality, but often we are reacting to our interpretation of reality. And that interpretation is heavily influenced by parts of ourselves we have never fully understood. Jung once wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." At first, this sounds unfair, almost insulting. Surely other people really can hurt us. And Jung would agree. But that was not his point. His point was that our strongest reactions often reveal something deeper than the event itself. The wound behind the reaction, the fear beneath the anger, the insecurity beneath the jealousy, the loneliness beneath the need for approval. In other words, life is constantly holding up mirrors, and most of us spend years staring into those mirrors without realizing we are looking at ourselves. The tragedy is not that these hidden wounds exist. The tragedy is that we spend our lives believing they belong entirely to the outside world. And as long as we believe that, we remain powerless to change them. Because what is unconscious cannot be transformed. It can only be repeated. And eventually, those repetitions begin shaping an identity. A version of ourselves designed to survive. A version of ourselves designed to avoid pain. A version of ourselves the world will accept. Carl Jung had a name for that version. He called it the persona. The mask that slowly replaced you. No child enters the world wearing a mask. A child laughs when they feel joy, cries when they feel pain, expresses curiosity without shame, speaks honestly, lives naturally. But slowly, life begins teaching a different lesson. Some emotions receive approval. Others receive rejection. Some behaviors are rewarded. Others are criticized. And without realizing it, the child begins adapting. A boy learns that vulnerability makes him look weak. A girl learns that expressing anger makes people uncomfortable. A sensitive child learns to hide their emotions. A creative child learns to suppress their imagination. Little by little, pieces of the authentic self are pushed aside, not because they are wrong, but because they seem unsafe. Years pass. The adaptation becomes stronger. The mask becomes more sophisticated. And eventually something strange happens. The person forgets where the mask ends and where they begin. A subscriber once shared a story that perfectly illustrates this. From the outside, his life appeared successful. A stable career, a respectable income, a good reputation. People admired him, trusted him, respected him. Yet every morning he woke up with the same feeling. Exhaustion, not physical exhaustion, psychological exhaustion. He described it as feeling like an actor trapped in a role he could no longer leave. Everyone seemed happy with who he was, except him. And that was the painful part. The person receiving all the admiration was not his authentic self. It was the character he had spent years creating. When he finally admitted this to himself, he realized something frightening. He had spent so long becoming who others wanted him to be that he no longer knew who he actually was. This is the persona trap, and according to Jung, it is one of the most common forms of suffering in modern life. Because success cannot heal the pain of self-betrayal. Approval cannot replace authenticity, and no amount of achievement can satisfy a self that has been abandoned. The persona may help you survive, but it can never make you whole. Because while the mask grows stronger, another part of you waits in silence, watching, remembering, refusing to disappear. Jung called that hidden part the shadow. Part 3. The shadow you keep running from, rewritten. The shadow is perhaps Jung's most famous idea, and also his most misunderstood. When people hear the word shadow, they imagine something dark, something dangerous, something shameful. But Jung was not talking about evil. He was talking about something far more personal, far more painful. The shadow is every part of you that was buried alive, not because it was wrong, but because someone once made you feel it was unsafe to exist. Think about that for a moment. Somewhere in your past, a version of you was fully alive, angry when wronged, joyful without reason, creative without permission, loud, sensitive, wild, free. And then the world began its quiet work. Stop crying. You're too much. Calm down. Be realistic. Don't be so sensitive. Each correction felt small, but each one carved away a piece of you. And the pieces that were carved away, they didn't disappear. They went underground. They became your shadow. Here is what nobody tells you about the shadow. It doesn't weaken over time. It grows stronger. Because everything you refuse to face accumulates. Every emotion you suppress builds pressure. Every truth you silence demands to be heard. And when the shadow grows powerful enough, it stops waiting for your permission. It begins speaking through you. Through the rage that appears from nowhere. Through the tears that make no sense. Through the self-sabotage that destroys everything you worked for. Through the patterns you swear you will never repeat. And yet somehow always do. This is why people are often violently drawn to certain qualities in others. You meet someone who speaks their truth without apology, and something inside you aches. You meet someone who walks away from what no longer serves them, and you cannot stop thinking about it. You tell yourself you simply admire them. But Jung saw something deeper. That ache is not admiration. That ache is recognition. You are not seeing someone else's freedom. You are catching a glimpse of the freedom you buried inside yourself. But the shadow does not only speak through longing. It also speaks through hatred. Pay close attention to this. The qualities you judge most harshly in others, the arrogance that disgusts you, the weakness that makes you angry, the neediness you cannot stand. Those reactions are never random. Jung believed the things we condemn most loudly in others are often the things we fear most silently within ourselves. The person who cannot tolerate weakness in others is often terrified of their own. The person who judges selfishness in everyone around them often carries a deep hunger they have never allowed themselves to feel. Life keeps holding up mirrors, and most people spend their entire lives mistaking the reflection for the enemy. The shadow is not your enemy. It is the part of you that has been waiting the longest to come home. And perhaps the most unsettling part is this. The shadow does not only contain what you hate. It also contains what could save you. Many people spend years trying to become stronger, yet the strength they seek already exists within them. Buried, rejected, forgotten. A man who spent his childhood trying to please everyone may discover that his shadow contains healthy anger, the ability to say no, the ability to disappoint people, the ability to protect himself. A woman who learned to stay invisible may discover that her shadow contains confidence, leadership, the desire to be seen, the desire to take up space. In other words, the shadow is not merely a prison of darkness. It is also a vault of lost power. And this is why the process of meeting the shadow feels so strange. What first appears frightening often turns out to be liberating. The anger you feared may become strength. The vulnerability you hid may become connection. The creativity you buried may become purpose. The confidence you rejected may become freedom. Jung believed that wholeness is not achieved by becoming better. It is achieved by becoming more complete, by reclaiming the parts of yourself that were abandoned long ago. Because the more of yourself you reject, the more power those rejected parts gain over your life. And the more of yourself you reclaim, the less control the unconscious has over your future. Part 4. Why the same life keeps happening to you, rewritten. There is a pattern so disturbing that most people refuse to see it. Not because it is hidden, but because seeing it would require admitting something deeply uncomfortable. Look at your life honestly. Not the surface, the emotional underneath. How many times have you felt the same rejection wearing a different face? How many times has a different person made you feel the exact same worthlessness? How many times have you stood at the edge of something real, something yours, and watched yourself walk away? Different years, different circumstances, different people. The same invisible hand pulling the same strings. Most people call this bad luck. Jung called it something else entirely. He called it the unconscious directing a play whose script you never agreed to perform. Here is the brutal truth. The relationships that hurt you most were not accidents. You were drawn to them by forces operating far beneath your awareness. Old wounds seeking familiar pain. Old beliefs confirming what they already decided was true. An unconscious mind completing a story that began long before you were old enough to choose. A woman who grew up feeling invisible to her father. walks into adulthood and falls in love again and again with men who cannot truly see her. Each relationship begins differently. Each one ends identically. She tells herself she is unlucky. But the unconscious knows exactly what it is doing. It is not searching for love. It is searching for resolution, trying to rewrite an old ending with a new person, and failing every single time. Because the wound is not in the relationship. The wound is inside her. And no external person can heal what lies that deep. Or consider the man who carries a quiet belief, formed in childhood, that he does not truly deserve success. He works hard. He gets close. Then something strange happens. He makes a decision that seems logical. He hesitates at the critical moment. He finds a reason the timing is wrong, and the opportunity disappears. He tells himself life never gives him a real chance. He cannot see what Jung would see immediately. He is not being denied by life. He is being denied by himself. This is what makes unconscious patterns so devastating. They feel like fate. They feel like the world doing something to you. They feel like evidence that life is unfair. But they are not fate. They are a conversation your unconscious is trying to have with you. A conversation it will keep starting. Through every relationship. Through every failure. Through every inexplicable self-destruction. Until you finally stop running. And listen, Jung wrote, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Read that again. Not as a philosophical idea, as a description of your life. Because somewhere in your history, a conclusion was made. About who you are. About what you deserve. About how much love is safe. About how much success is allowed. You did not consciously choose that conclusion. It was formed in moments of pain too early to understand. But it has been running your life ever since. Quietly, relentlessly, invisibly. And it will continue running your life until the day you look directly at it. Not with judgment, not with shame, but with the courage to finally ask, whose story am I actually living? The person you have never met at a certain point, a disturbing realization begins to emerge. The people who hurt you were not the whole story. The masks you wore were not the whole story. Even the patterns you called fate were not the whole story. Something deeper was operating beneath them all. You, or more precisely, the parts of you that had never been fully seen. This is where Jung's work takes an unexpected turn. Most people spend their lives trying to understand the world. Very few spend their lives trying to understand themselves. Yet Jung believed that the greatest mystery a person will ever encounter is not the world outside. It is the unknown territory within, because hidden beneath the persona. And within that distance, something new becomes possible. Choice. This is the beginning of what Jung called individuation. The lifelong process of becoming who you actually are. Not who your childhood demanded. Not who society rewarded. Not who fear created. But who you are beneath all of it. Individuation is not self-improvement. It is self-recovery. A gradual return. A reclaiming of everything that was abandoned along the way. The confidence that was buried. The vulnerability that was hidden. The creativity that was sacrificed. The truth that was never spoken. The self that was left behind. Piece by piece, these forgotten fragments begin returning. And as they return, something changes. Life may look exactly the same. The same job. The same city. The same people. Yet your experience of reality becomes different. Because you are no longer seeing life entirely through unconscious eyes. You begin seeing yourself. And that changes everything. The rejection still happens. But it no longer defines you. The criticism still arrives. But it no longer destroys you. Fear still exists. But it no longer controls every decision. The pattern begins to loosen. The old script begins to weaken. The fate you once believed was inevitable begins losing its grip. And perhaps that is the deepest insight Jung offered. Freedom is not found by controlling life. Freedom is found by becoming conscious of the forces that have been controlling you. Because the moment you see the pattern clearly, you are no longer completely trapped inside it. The moment you see the mask, You are no longer completely identified with it. The moment you meet the hidden self, the life you have been living begins to transform. Not because the world changed, but because the person experiencing the world has changed. And perhaps that is why Jung believed the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Because the greatest journey is not toward success, not toward approval, not toward certainty. It is toward the person you have been searching for your entire life. The person who has been quietly waiting beneath every mask, behind every projection, and underneath every fate you thought was written for you. The person you have never fully met. Yourself.